Right, real quick, I'll talk about self-storage really quick, and I feel like people hate self-storage, love self-storage, or are curious about self-storage because so many people are drawn to it. So if you love self-storage or are curious, this is for you. If you hate it, hang in there. This is short. So real quickly, pretty healthy deliveries out in the Bozeman, Belgrade area, Belgrade especially. Obviously, Bozeman proper is tougher to get development through. You saw stabilization and healthy rent growth. So this indicates that as of now, as of today, you are absorbing as fast as things are delivering, and there isn't an indication of oversaturation just yet. We don't see it on the horizon, but we'll talk about kind of what's happening in the industry in general. Our team has been fortunate enough to close 3 facilities so far this year. We're working on a 4th. Each transaction has been very, very interesting. The conversations are totally different than they were a year or 2 ago. Your buyer pool is much smaller than it was. And so we'll talk a little bit about why. Rent growth has cooled across the country and in Montana as well. Some markets saw rent growth upwards of 9%. Now we're seeing it back around 3%. This is normal. This is not bad news. Occupancy fluctuations are also back. Typically with self-storage, you see a little bit of vacancy tick up in the fall and then late spring, early summer. This didn't happen for 2 to 3 years. You might have had 1 unit come available and it was rented later that day. So now we're seeing the occupancy fluctuations back, and it actually started last fall in 2022, and everybody kind of panicked in the industry. Everybody was freaking out, what's going on? Now we built too much. If it's happening to you, if you own a facility, you're not alone, it's happening to everybody, and they have not hit any more extremes than they have in years in the past. So it's just an indication that we're signaling back to kind of a healthier supply level. Transaction volume is down. This is completely different from what I talked about industrial. This has everything to do with what Connor talked about earlier. The capital markets has torpedoed a lot of the ability for buyers in the self-storage sector to meet seller expectations. And I don't blame sellers. You just enjoyed 2 to 3 years of incredible rent growth. You have a stabilized, well-performing asset. And now all of a sudden you're supposed to sell at an elevated cap rate. Well, I don't want to. You wouldn't want to. But buyers can't buy at what you want. So we have a lot of gridlock there as well, kind of what Connor mentioned. So the transactions we've on so far are 1031 buyers, cash buyers who are not subject to the debt markets and to the volatility of interest rates. For this reason, cap rates have remained compressed, which makes no sense. But because transactions are down, the ones that are happening are still keeping cap rates low. However, my conversations are with the hundreds of calls we get on facilities when they bring them to market, 6+ cap rate, 6.5 cap rate, probably even higher now. And a year and a half ago, it was 5, 4.5 was fine because you get a 3% interest rate. Developers have pulled back in the beginning of 2023. Montana, not so much, but nationwide. I think we're going to see a lot of development stalled. There's a couple markets in Montana that are starting to make me a little nervous with a lot coming online. Class A facilities are taking priority. So if you have a Class B facility, this would be something that's maybe not paved, not fenced, doesn't have lighting, maybe not all the bells and whistles. Investors are kind of knocking close to 12% off perceived value there, just because you don't have all of these amenities, whereas they're only dinging Class A facilities closer to 3% for those things. So the amenities are starting to kind of show themselves in preference. And then lastly, growing concerns of oversaturation. Belgrade, I think the sprawl and the population growth happening here is still quite healthy and still on pace to absorb what's being delivered. Missoula makes me very nervous because we have delivered several facilities lately, and there are 3 facilities in massive expansion mode. Hundreds and hundreds of units are expanding, and then you have other people looking to develop over there. So I'm a little nervous about Missoula, and then North Flathead. Kalispell and the south end of Kalispell and actually the north end of Kalispell between Kalispell and Whitefish has had a lot of deliveries. I haven't seen the housing deliveries meet what's coming online there. So if you are looking for a facility in that area, I would be very careful on how you underwrite your rent growth there. So here is underwriting in 2023. It probably feels like this for you, feels like this for us. sometimes. So I think what the important thing is pay attention to the levers. Good deal, good, and the ones that can possibly tank where you want to go. Stick with the team that pays attention to new deliveries, what's coming online, rent growth, how do I underwrite? You don't want to underwrite for 6% rent growth when it's 2% in your market. So things like that. So, you know, keep your advisory team close, make sure they're paying attention to the same things you do. And we'll get through 2023 just fine.